Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to take the time to introduce Kim O'Hara. Book coach to bestsellers, Kim O'Hara has delighted audiences with her knowledge and wit about the art of not just writing a book, but how sharing your story can radically change your life. She has countless examples of coach, leader, executive clients who, when writing about their journey, ascend in their lives and aspire to others. Kim has been called a book Sherpa, ride and die, BFF, miracle maker, and guardian angel by her clients. She sets anyone straight who is on the fence about either writing a book or believing their vision deserves a wider audience. She coaches them to say yes to their book dreams. Her 2-decade career in Hollywood as a movie producer and screenwriter adds a special edge of storytelling and crafting a story that entertains as well as invokes emotion. She pulls out the greatest potential in clients willing to voice their dreams and get honest and help and inspire others. She has watched book clients share their story and land major roles in TV shows, as we see it, as well as top 10 positions on book lists such as Wall Street Journal, Barnes & Noble, Nonfiction, and USA Today. She has taken the stage at the NAWBO Charlotte, Empower Women RI, and ICF Los Angeles. She's a contributor to Biz Journal's Bizwoman, read by 14.6 million people, and the YouTube channel Film Courage, which has 438,000 subscribers. She also has a podcast, You Should Write a Book About That. She will release a self-help book on sexual abuse denial in 2023 with BQB Publishing, and is working on a book on how to write a book and a collection of essays on buying her first home in South Los Angeles. Kim can be found on Instagram on A Story Inside and at Kim O'Hara Books, as well as on LinkedIn and Facebook. So Kim, welcome. We're glad to see you, and let's get going.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here and talk about, empowering women. This talk is a new talk for me. So this is a maiden voyage of this talk. So I'm really grateful that you're all here and sharing this with me. This talk did come from my own experiences of wanting to not talk about my past and then realizing the value of talking about my past and how that helps other women to come forward and not be, scared about the stories they have to share. And it also comes from realizing that my past is part of who I am, and to deny it creates a lack of integration with myself. So I'm not going to get like super woo-woo about the soul identity and the shaman journey, although I've done all that, but it's very much an epiphany that I had that to be my fullest, most authentic self, I had to embrace all the parts of me. And if you're like me or like any of my book clients and you've been gifted the dream to want to write a book or to tell your story, you have to listen to that calling, because that calling has been given to you for a reason. You're going to meet a lot of people that are going to be like, yeah, no, I never want to write a book. They're like really confident about that. And if you're one of the people that are like, I can't stop thinking about telling my story and I can't stop thinking about writing a book, it's not going to go away. You can try to push it away, but it's probably not going to go away, because there's something about your lived experience that is destined to help a lot of people. And, you want to believe in that. And we're in the process through this talk today of looking at why we don't feel comfortable doing that. So I'm going to share my screen. I have like a PowerPoint that's not, incredibly overwhelming. It's pretty simple. A lot of what I do is just talk through a lot of the content. So just to make sure you're in the right breakout room. This is the breakout room for the woman I am now is not the woman I was, how to capitalize on your past. And, take notes today, either on a pad with, a pen and an iPad. A few 10 or 15 minutes into my talk, I am going to I've set aside a decent amount of time, 10 or 15 minutes, to have you do some work on this breakout session. I'm a very experiential coach. I don't like to sit and just blah, blah, blah for an hour and not have you have an experience. I'm interested in us having a conversation. This is a small group. This is a safe group. If you don't feel comfortable talking about something, this is being recorded. I understand, but this also is your opportunity to take that first step into sharing a part of your story that you think might help other people. And we can do that here, and I can help you walk through that. So, like I said, my goal here today is to have you walk away, if you do choose to share or even just ingest what I'm talking about, a sense of peace about your past and how to use it in your current day to day. Because no matter what age you're at, I have clients that are 30 and I have clients that are 70. We've all had experiences. They're all part of our past, and we can use them to move forward, and we can use them to inform us about who we are and what our position is on this earth and what we're destined to do. So, what I want to break through first is, what can the power of telling your story do for you as the woman you are now versus burying it so that nobody knows? And that's something that's really the crux of what we're talking about. So, telling your past can change the old tapes that play in your head. So, when we have secrets and we don't want to talk about our past, that gives fuel to our mind to then take over and continue to tell us that we are those old stories that we then want to get rid of. When we tell those secrets, whether it's through writing a book, whether it's through blogging, whether it's through just getting up at a women's conference and taking the microphone and sharing, we have an opportunity to tell those old tapes. You're not going to have control over me. I'm going to have control over you. I'm going to now take control of that narrative. And I'm now going to bring that narrative out so that I can tell other women, so other women can go, oh my God, I think the same things in my head. Haven't you ever been in one of those situations where you just get honest? You just have that day where you're like, I'm just going to get honest with some other women, and you tell them something and they're like, yeah, I do that too. And you're like, no way. Because you thought you were literally the only one on this planet that did that. And then you find out that there's like all these other people that do that. And you feel so much better, and it takes the power away from it. So that's the first point in the power of telling your past. Financial ceilings can get broken. There is an entire global market of coaches and authors and spiritual guides based on why we think as women we can't make a lot of money. There are so many if you think about it, women couldn't even play professional sports till 50 years ago. That's it. Only 50 years ago. Okay. So I'm not even going to get into it. Like, that's not what this talk is. But we have a lot of stories about money, and they go as far back as how your parents made money and what you were taught when you were raised. I was raised with money doesn't grow on trees. And if I asked for a couple bucks from my dad, he said, I'm going to go in the basement and make some money and I'll be right back. Right. So a lot of sarcasm. Okay. So I grew up thinking, well, I don't have a money tree and I don't have a basement. So where am I going to find money? Right. I mean, we literally think we're not taking these things that are told us literally, but they become part of our story, right? So part of our story is, I'm never going to be more than middle class. I'm never going to make a lot more money. I have a friend who came to me the other day and she said, I'm trying to negotiate something and I want more money, but they keep telling me that the upside is the opportunity that I'm getting. And she had come up with all these, she was arguing too much. And I said, well, all you have to say is, I'd like the money and the opportunities. And she was like, oh. And I'm like, all that other stuff is your story. And it doesn't need to be here. You can write about that. You can talk about that. And that's what she was doing, is she was sharing that with another woman, and therefore realizing we don't need to go out and explain why we are the way we are. We just need to talk about it, break free, and then look to another woman who's in a different place and ascend to another level. Okay, so relationships, a lot of people write books about relationships, right? Divorces, 50% of the country are divorced. Many of us, including me, have been married twice. There's a lot of shame that you can have on being married twice and divorced twice, right? Like, it's like it's shameful, right? To say that you're looking maybe to get married for a third time. These are old stories, but they're also based on, again, the history and what we've grown up in and with what we've done. I used to go from being embarrassed that since my marriage ended 12 years ago, that I've had 7 relationships. I thought that was embarrassing. But every single one of those relationships taught me what I never had learned originally about relationships. And I'm able to look at them and see a pattern on paper of all the things that I'm doing, because I was the common denominator, right? So to get happy, I had to really start to do some writing and look in and say, wow, every time, these relationships ended around 3 months, 4 months. What's my part in that? And start writing that down, and then making an ideal of, what kind of woman do I want to be? Okay, so that's the woman I was. Okay, now what's the woman I want to be? And yes, it can be as hokey as like writing your ideal partner list or doing some of those things that they suggest we do. And some of those things kind of work. But really, it goes back to like not really believing that it's okay that we've had a series of relationships that have taught us something. That's the missing piece, is that we think there's something wrong. There's nothing wrong. If you're your original you and you're on the path to learning and you know what you want to share, you're just who you are. And also creating a world of abundance that was held back by your conditioning. I have a client who believes very strongly, she's writing a book right now, that really ultimately what holds us back the most is that we just aren't in the present. And when you're in the present and you're completely aware of what you're doing, what you're saying, the choices you're making, you no longer are held back by your conditioning. And she's writing a whole book about this, right? So she's taking experiences that she had in that area, saying a little bit about her experience, and then bringing forward the teachings. She would have never had those teachings if she hadn't have gone through it herself. And now she can bring that out into the marketplace as a coach. If you want to be a leader, and we'll get into a little bit later, some of your stories and who you are. But if you want to be a leader, you really do have to operate from a position of abundance. It's really something that if you looked at leaders across the board, you would find that they have an abundant mindset. They're generally not held back by their own conditioning anymore. A lot of them have written books. A lot of them have done the work to get rid of that conditioning. And if you're like me, and I'm very transparent about my experiences, sometimes I wake up and I think, thoughts that are really in my head, like, oh my God, like I'm broken, I'm worthless, I'm nasty, I'm stupid. But that's really just that old thinking that sometimes can come in. And I have to remind that old thinking, I'm not the woman that thinks that way anymore. I am a woman that I am now today, and I have a job, and that job is to go speak to other women from the point I am now, who's able to be on the other side and say, I've thought those things about myself. It's possible I could think like those things about myself again, but I've done the writing and I've done the work. And that's really where I come from as a book coach, is I believe you can really write your way through to the other side to be the woman that you want to be. So I want to just give this is the leadership piece. So this is Naomi Joseph. I love Naomi because Naomi is a perfect example of someone who, she was a binge eater for 40 years. So forever. And she was really ashamed of being a binge eater. And she still sort of was a little bit of a binge eater when she started writing the book. So she was sort of straddling that fine line of still being the woman that she was or is, and looking at the woman she wanted to be. So as she wrote the book and she started to realize all the reasons why she had been a binge eater, from anxiety, from certain upbringing in the Orthodox Jewish community with her dad, and her book's out. So I'm not giving you anything private. You can buy her book. But she then realized, like, as she was healing and leaving that woman that she was to become the woman she wants to be, she also realized how many people and how many women are out there binge eating. So she was then able to write about her past, but it was now for another audience. It wasn't just cathartic and for her to feel better. And now, as sort of a product, a byproduct of that process, she no longer binge eats. Like, it's not even an option anymore. It doesn't even cross her mind because she's so now in that place of the woman she wants to be. I've worked with women who were voiceless growing up. A lot of times, they were told that they were too loud, or, this wasn't the time, this isn't the place for you to speak. They come from some kind of form of molestation, and are told not to talk about it. And they've moved on and written books about having a voice and being a strong woman, and how coming from a position like that oftentimes can lend you to being in an adult abusive relationship because you've been told that you're not supposed to say anything. So this particular author is on a crusade to make sure that women that are abused understand where that systemically can come from, and for them to have a voice. And I've had a woman who I think Brian mentioned in the talk, a young woman, Sue Ann Pien, who is the star of this show on Amazon called As We See It. And it's about autistic young adults living together and trying to navigate the world. She wrote a book with me and discovered her autism basically in the process of writing the book, and then took the discovery, which was quite hard, and got a role playing. She's probably going to be nominated for an Emmy for this role. And so it's like, what we think is sometimes like the war, oh my God, I don't want to, this is horrible. How could I have discovered this? The truth is debilitating. It's actually what is going to set you free. So, there's women who have lied, there's women who have cheated. I'm going to tell you straight up, like, I've lied, I've cheated. This is what's not in my bio. Okay. This is what I love. Brian reads this like great bio, and it's like all these like nifty things about me. But here's the truth. Like, I've misbehaved, I've lost opportunities, I've denied myself my true feelings. I've behaved as a mother in ways that can still bring emotions up for me, from my past, all in my past. But there are women out there who are, abusing, addicted to things, not being the mothers that they want to be. And that's something that I need to talk about. And I do talk about that in my book, the phase I went through where, hurt people hurt and abused people abuse. And it's a terrible, horrible thing to have to face, but it's true. And so I had to write about it. That was one of my responsibilities with my past. And believe me, I didn't feel good about it, but after I shared and wrote my book about it, I broke glass ceilings. I made more money than I've ever made before. I started developing relationships with my children that still take my breath away. We're so incredibly close. And I was able to buy a house in Los Angeles, which is something that Brian had mentioned, on a single woman's salary. And it was such a profound and cathartic experience. I'm writing a book about it. So, it's like these places we come from that seem so disparate turn into these just wells of abundant opportunity for our writing and for our experiences. And if anyone says, oh, I don't have anything to write about, you have not looked close enough to your life and what you've been through and what you've shared, because every single human being is a unique human being, and nobody else is like you. Nobody else will write in your voice, and nobody else will tell your story the way you're going to tell it. And I'll tell you, if you look at other authors and say, well, they wrote books because, I'll tell you why there's other authors that wrote books because they just did it. That's it. It's that simple. Is they just said, this is something I've got to share. And then, this is another talk, but there's a lot of reasons why certain books get seen and others don't. That's for another day. This is me and my daughters today on a trip we just took to Paris. And I've taken my children to Mexico and New York and Spain. And my old story, the woman I once was a lower middle class woman who came from a crazy family, and I had been abused, and no one was going to love me, and I was never going to make any money, and no one was going to care about me. And today that is 100% not the truth. 100% not the truth. But I had to come to terms with the fact that it was okay to talk about that, and not just walk around and be like, oh, everything's so fine, everything's great, I'm okay. When you do that, it's gonna come out in all these other ways. Like, there's no way you can prevent how you feel about yourself or the stories you're telling about yourself. They're gonna leak out in all other areas of your life, and you have to get honest about that. So I just always say, go out and share your story for the countless others that are still hiding under the sheets. And if any of us, have been there in those good, bad, and ugly moments, there's definitely times when you're like, I just really don't want to get out from under the sheets. Because when we start to be successful, we want people to know us and like us, right? And we're like, oh, now that they're starting to know me and like me, why would I tell anybody anything about me? Like, that's just going to make them really not, like, no way. Things are going really well. Like, things are getting all shiny right now. Why would I go mess that up and share something about my past? Maybe it's just better. Let's just not. The truth is that you're going to plateau. I know it sounds crazy to think about digging up dirt, and I'm not saying we spend the rest of our lives hoeing up the crap, but if you just bury it without taking a good hard look at it and then finding the gems in which you can share, you will plateau, and I understand the fear factor. I understand being scared. I understand how lonely it can feel to talk about your past and tell your story, but we are denying people the full picture of who we are when we only tell one part of the story, right? So what it comes down to is, it comes down to confidence, right? You have to feel confident and willing to be able to be the woman that you want to be. And that can sometimes come with time, right? So I have another client, and her name is Gretchen. Here she is. Here, I'll just show you who she is. Her name is Gretchen Heido. She's a highly successful coach in Los Angeles. And she came to me and said, women just hold so many secrets. It's crazy, the secrets that women tell me that they've never told anybody. And she created a secret breaking system. This is her book, so that women can go through it and tell secrets. And this is what I'm talking about. This is the past that will rip you apart. This is the past that you're most afraid of, that you don't want to talk about. And I'm telling you, the minute that you're willing to talk about it, you are going to capitalize on it on so many ways, because you are denying yourself a part of your actual lived life. And like I said in the very beginning, we are one whole part of everything we've ever done, and that informs us of who we are. If we leave any of that out, then we're really denying people to see the greatest part of ourselves. So why do we not want to be the women we were when we are the women we are now? I want to go through these pillars, because what we're going to do when we're done going through these pillars is I'm going to have you keep those in mind when we do the exercise I'm going to have you do today. And then you can have a chance to really think about a particular area that might come up for you when you have a story that you might want to tell, because these are usually the constructs that hold you back. So obstacle number one is the mind. I love, oops, sorry about that. Mind trash. The mind trash is amazing. If you could just sit and have someone, dictate what goes on in our minds all day long, no matter where we are, it would be an endless scroll that just goes on and down the floor and out the house and down the street and wraps around a tree. There's so much about it. But if you talk about who you were in your old story, you think, I'm going to lose everything, right? So instead, we play out these incredible stories, right? Like how you're going to lose your job, your friends, your partners, your opportunities. So before you've even done anything, you've already talked yourself completely out of it based on information that you're carrying into your decision of your old story that you haven't taken time to reconcile with. So you're sitting there and allowing all this old history to inform new history. And what happens if this is the time that's not going to happen? What happens if this is the big breakthrough for you? What happens if this is like the moment that this is the guy or girl or the they, or this is the job, or this is the opportunity you've been waiting for? Yeah, it feels scary, but it's nothing like those other times. Well, our mind trash will tell us that it is going to be a problem. So we want to keep ourselves watchful of that. Self-judgment. Okay, self-judgment is different than mind trash. Mind trash is pretty endless, and it's creative and crafty, and the ego is involved in mind trash. But self-judgment is really just those moments that we think, I'm too fat, I'm not funny enough, I'm worthless, I'm not successful. And those thoughts in our head, or those self judgments, come up because we've been in situations before where, guess what? Other people have thought that or said that or indicated that about us in some way. And it can go way back to your kindergarten teacher. It can go back to a passing thing that someone said. If you are at all open to other people's opinions, like many of us are, then that becomes part of your old story. And, as a woman, like, people tell me sometimes when I'm out places, my kids will tell me, or someone else will tell me, like, your voice really projects. And I laugh because that could be like completely insulting. They could just be like saying basically you're loud, right? And I'm like, I am loud. Like, I am just a very boisterous, loud person. And then without being insulted about it, sometimes I could go places, I could be like, I should talk a little softer, but I'm not like, Kim, you're such a loud, brash, God, you're so, and then immediately goes to like, you're so, like, no one likes you, and that's why you didn't get that opportunity. And back in 1993, I mean, it's like all of a sudden you're in 1993, or all of a sudden you're in that place and you're like, wow, that's a story I haven't really integrated with myself yet. And so you kind of want to look at those that come up and start making note of them, because they will be certain things that will replay over and over and over again. We have, and I could do a whole lecture on this, but we have 3 to 5 wound stories that will come up again and again and again until we deal with them, make friends with them, and somehow look at them as a positive in our lives. If not, they're just going to keep coming up again and again and again. So the third one is isolation. And I hear this, first of all, this is a challenge for writers, because they're like, oh my God, I feel like I'm so alone. Am I isolating? And I'm like, no, you're actually writing. And, sometimes you've got to be by yourself when you write. It's just the nature of the job. But I'm talking about the kind of isolation where, there's parts of you that you don't want to share, or you're trying to be really cautious and careful that something might be said. And so you'd rather just not go to the party, or you'd rather not go to the job interview, or maybe not go on that date. Or maybe not do that Instagram post that you woke up and thought would be a really good idea. And then in the mind trash starts with like, here's all the bad things that are going to happen when you do that post. And then the self-judgment comes that it's like, you're not even smart. Why would you even do that? There's so many more people that are smarter than you doing posts on Instagram. Just go back to the fridge and eat some ice cream. It's so much easier and so much more rewarding. And this is the things that happen, like, to all of us, to even the most professional, amazing, successful women. This happens all the time. So these are the 3 pillars that I see as the obstacles, for why we initially won't tell our story. These are not obstacles to why we don't write books. Why we don't write books is a whole other list, very specific to that craft and that art. And I do talk specifically on that. But right now, I really want to talk about, like where we're at as women and how we can start to vet some of these stories. Every year that I work as a book coach, I'm faced with people coming to me with the challenge that they want to talk about and write something for the first time. And it can be very, bring up a lot of shame for them, and a lot of fear. But as they start to write about who they are and what they came from and who they can help, I've seen them just come alive and just change in ways that I never even fathomed that they could even possibly change. And they're surprised too. They're surprised on how they're going to change. Right. And I'm not saying that you need to, like show up somewhere, unshowered and crying and half drunk and like, waving your top in the air going, I'm the woman I am now. No, I don't advocate that. I definitely advocate for this to be done in a self-appraising, mature and dignified way. And there is a way to do that, right? Before you have the meltdown and before you have the breakdown. So what I'd love to do, and if anybody's opposed to this, and we'll go to this card later, I'm going to stop my share. What I'd like to do is, first of all, does anybody have any questions about anything that I've shared so far that they would like to ask? It's a small group and I'd love to answer anything before we go into this exercise that we're going to do.
Maybe you talk about this in the exercise, but do you have any mindfulness practices that you use when you're realizing that you're getting stuck in mind trash or self-judgment or isolation, anything like that?
I immediately do an affirmation that's the opposite. Like immediately, right? So if I'm like, oh my God, my boyfriend, I can't even believe that he like did that on that date or whatever, I'll immediately write down, I have the best boyfriend. And literally like 2 hours later, he'll call and do something nice. I'll be like, oh my God, I'm so glad I did not act on that. Because really it's old stuff. Like all guys will eventually fail me. That's the old story, right? So the only way to intercept that is to be like, he's great. And then he's like, it's all gone. I'm like, wow, that was super easy. Or, for authors that are trying to get their books published and they're going out to agents and they call me up and they say, oh my God, I went out to 35 agents and no one is calling. I'm gonna be like, the new mantra and affirmation is, the right agent is coming to me now while I'm just waiting to say yes. And it works. I see it work all the time because there's always another solution too. So you want to put yourself in the mindset of like, well, it's not those 35, fine. But it opened me up to think about, well, who else do I know? Who else can I make contact with? We have far bigger networks than we give ourselves credit for. If we really think about it, we know people that knows people that know people. We just don't take the time to really ask for help, which is a big part of that. So I would say affirmations. And I also, as a writer and as someone who lives in Los Angeles where there's never a silent moment, I definitely get out to nature. And I could go walking on a trail for 35 minutes and have the best idea I've ever had. And I cannot wait to get home and write it down. Like better than anything I would have had sitting at my desk going, I am not leaving until I make millions. And then I'm just like mean to everybody, So you definitely want to go out and are you, Erin, do you live somewhere where you can take like nature walks and?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm in Kansas City, so I miss the Pacific Northwest or just West Coast nature, but we live right by some parks I can go wander around in.
Yeah, it's so fulfilling to just wander around and see people. I also like to do character studies. So, I like to watch people and, people might think I'm a little nutty if they see me doing it, but I just talk about people sometimes. I'm like, God, I wonder why he's doing that. That's so odd. Like, what's his deal? Like, wait, what? I mean, I do it in my car to not get angry at people. I'll just be like, okay, honey, like you do you, you know what I mean? But we can talk about people, and then you get these great character ideas too, you know, and that's great for any kind of writing mind. So I hope that helped.
Absolutely.
Any-
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to take a pen and paper or your laptop or whatever. I tend to like these exercises to not be on the computer. There's a different kind of editor judgment that comes in when we're on the computer. When you just do pen and paper, you're a little bit more free form. And I'd like you to write the first story or secret of your past that comes to mind that you're hesitant to tell because you think it's going to hurt you more than it's going to help you. And what we'll do is we'll take 5 minutes and you're going to write without stopping, without editing, without overthinking about that secret. And then we're going to open it up for anybody who wants to share about it. So Brian can tell us when 5 minutes are up. He can be the dun, 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 dun. He can be our little clock. And if you don't want to do the exercise, don't do the exercise. But I think you'll enjoy it. I think, Brian, you should do it.
Okay.
Diane's already doing it. And they don't have to be big, searing secrets. They can be, I discovered the checkout person did not charge me for the water under my cart, and I didn't go back. Which I would never do, but I'm just saying.
Okay, Kim, I'll give you about the 1 more minute warning of your 5 minutes here.
Okay. All right. So wrap up your last sentence. And let's see who would like to be a brave warrior woman and share with the group.
I will, but it might be triggery.
Okay, so we'll do like a trigger warning. That's all. So go ahead.
Okay. So mine is a visit to the insane asylum with my father at 11 years old. Sitting in the car, doors and windows locked, temperature rising to unbearable, unbreathable space. I look around at the fences, tall and topped with barbed wire, remembering his admonishment that if anyone sees the real me, I will be placed on the inside of the cold walls rather than the outside. An hour before, we had walked through the hallways. We had seen the rooms where they did electric shock and lobotomies. Although at the time, I didn't understand the destructiveness of those procedures. What I did know was the screaming and moaning echoed so loudly in my ears, I couldn't think. I knew I needed to run away from this place. But now on the outside, I was caught between suffocating worlds.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's very, very brave. Thank you. In terms of the woman you once were and the woman you are now, when you read that, what would you think that sharing that would do for someone else that's in a similar situation?
That's kind of hard because I have a hard time thinking about what would be a similar situation for people. Although there's only been a couple people I've shared that with, and what they've shared with me is they then see or go back to the place where they felt trapped or up against unreasonable choices, feeling stuck or unseen, afraid to exist, afraid to be seen and hiding. So, I don't really know. When I start exploring that, I'm like, that's survived, that's in the past. And yet we went for a walk at the old abandoned mental hospital here a few weeks ago. And I'm like, it's not really in the past.
It's not in the past. Right. Yeah. Which is my whole point, is when you then share it, then like the power of your triggers and your story then get transferred to someone else who's really not even written as much as you just wrote. There's people that can't even put that down on paper yet. They're just so we're convinced that our sorrow is going to engulf us and incapacitate us, right? And we could get upset. But what I heard from you also was, with so much mental illness in our country right now, and so few options for people to get help, especially people that, deal with family members that are psychotic or bipolar. It's really, you being the woman you are today, you're beautiful, you help with a conference, you're happily married. Like, you went from that, you had the potential to you could have become one of many other things, and you didn't. And so you have the opportunity to share that and say, I'm willing to talk about it. I'm willing to talk about that story, being who I am today.
Well, and I think what you said at the beginning that really kind of took me into that is, at that time, he said, if you cry, if you share your emotions, if you tell people family business, they're going to put you inside, right? So it was his way of putting me in that prison without me physically being in that prison. And so my whole life was, you shut off that emotion, you don't feel, you don't let people know where you are. And that is where I connect with other women.
Wow.
Because so many of us in different ways have been put in that place where somebody built a wall around us so that we would be inside, whether they were there or
not. Absolutely. Very good awareness. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Would anybody else like to share? Rebecca.
Well, it was the stealing that triggered me.
Okay. Let's hear it. I love a good stealing story.
Mom used to make the best angel food cake. I know it was from a box, but still. When she did bake it after all. She would also make this chocolate icing, and it would cover the top of the cake like a shiny black lake. Then it would drip deliciously down the sides. She kept the cake in a white cake holder. I guess that's what it was called. It had a handle on top so that it could be carried to the table. And when the top was turned just a bit to the left, she would open it, take it off, and reveal the delicious bit of heaven beneath. I love that cake so much that when no one was in the kitchen, I would take the entire container to the bathroom and close the door. There, with a serrated knife, I would try to cut a very straight piece off and shove it into my mouth. But the slice was never quite straight, and I knew that my mom would accuse me of stealing cake. So I kept cutting and cutting and cutting to try to get the straight piece until there was barely a piece left.
Mm. Oh my gosh. I do that now. That's what my kids are like, Mom, have you been cutting slivers off the cake? I'm like, yep, that's what I do.
I still do it too.
Yeah, but as a child, my mom, they would have Cool Whip. We didn't have really a lot of sweets in the house. And I'd go down with a spoon and I'd try to take it in a way that smoothed it. Who was I kidding? And I still do that now, now I don't care. But then I was like so scared I was going to get caught, then you've eaten half the Cool Whip. Then you're like, oh my God, I ate half the Cool Whip.
Totally. Yeah. And then as a teenager, did you steal alcohol? So we would steal like gin from my mom's gin bottle, fill it up with water, so that the thing goes on.
It just
Anyway.
goes on and on. It goes on and on. So you can tell those stories. You see how I already jumped on that. And I was like, oh my God, this is so funny. Because then we can talk about how today, like I'll eat slivers of cake and be like, yeah, I do that. That's just my thing. Like, I just do that. I don't commit to a piece. It's ridiculous. Right.
Or
I eat
half.
42 slivers, right. But that's it is what I do. So we get to own it and laugh about it. And then it doesn't become this weird sort of dirty food problem, that causes body dysmorphia and all that crazy stuff.
Right.
So that's great. Thank you.
Kim, I just wanted to let you know we have about 5 more minutes.
Okay. I think we have time to just hear. I have just a few slides just to wrap up. We probably have time for one more person to read. Does anybody else want to read? No? Okay. That's fine. Let me share my screen again. Let's see. I think I'm here. Okay. Let me go down to wrap this out. Okay, so here's what I find, get to it. So how do we, find the opportunities to take these stories out and change our minds and give us, the strongest, least shameful way to do this? Well, there's groups like this, okay? Like just raising your hand and reading something. I'm really big in my community, my Historian Side community, to have groups of people that are men and women talk about, their stories, whether it's end of the year events or on Zoom like we did here. This one was actually a Facebook Live. They actually got really honest on a Facebook Live, and a lot of people really appreciated them talking about their stories on a Facebook Live. And I'm talking about finding a like-minded community that you need uniquely to you. I am not a big fan of Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups and groups. I just don't think that people are able to get really real in them. That's just my personal opinion. So I'm saying when it comes to dealing with your story and your history and wanting to integrate yourself, I feel like you need more of an intimate group of women that can meet hopefully soon live, conferences that you go to every year, like a conference like this. Maybe this is an environment where you can cultivate friendships and you come back every year, or you create subgroups that you can get together and have these conversations. And the other solution to this is to break out of the box, and I'll just tell this really quick story. When I went to Paris, I had done a previous trip with my kids to Spain where I was the travel agent. I did all the maps. I did all the booking. I found every day was like, where are we going to eat? What are we going to do? Paris has been my dream for 30 years. So when it came time to go to Paris, I hired a concierge. Now, the minute I hired a concierge, I was like, the voices just kicked. They were like, who do you think you are to hire a concierge? What are you, high fluting society? And I talk back to it. I'd be like, no, I just don't want to do the maps. I'd be like, well, I don't know who you think you are. Well, the trip was already a gazillion dollars. The concierge was only 800 of that. This woman made literally an itinerary. I never had to do anything in Paris. I was told where to go, where to eat, and not in some weird sort of curated, like boring way, like in an exciting way that I was part of. And after I did that, I just elevated to another level. I elevated to the level of a woman who, can hire a concierge. But the old story, the part of me that's still real, is I'm very frugal. And so I didn't have to get rid of that part, but instead of that part being like, oh, I can't pay for anything, oh, I'm poor, oh, I'm this, I moved that over into the concierge section and was like, well, I can still have a concierge, but that doesn't mean I have to go to $300 dinners or do all these other things that I'm smart about. So when we reconcile all those things, we become these like powerful forces of nature. We're hiring concierges, and we're saving money, and we're taking trips, and we're doing all these incredible things. And we're also like aware of what we come from. So if it ever comes up to share that with someone, we can be present for them. So those are really the two areas, just in a really quick nutshell, that I see that you can start doing your story. If you want to take a screenshot of this, this is just, I don't want to just be like blowing into this conference and blowing out. This is my link to just have a conversation about this time we spent together. That's really it. So you can also follow me on Instagram or Kim O'Hara Books. And I think I'm like right on time, right, Brian? It's like, it's about to be 2:10.
Kim, that was a great and very inspirational. I really appreciate it. Unfortunately, with the a virtual conference, we don't have the ability that you could hear that applause. So on behalf of the 100 of attendees of the We Ignite conference this year, I want to thank you. That was very, very interesting and very inviting. And I hope that we can hear from you again.
It was an incredible hour to spend with amazing women getting real about their stories and how we can push out into the world and be integrated as ourselves. So thank you so much, Brian, for hosting such a great group.
Great. Thank you, Kim.